It's amazing how they know ahead of time that there's going to be another bio attack, and they can't tell you exactly who it's going to be from, but they're just telling you that there will be one because, of course, as this channel says, nations conspire. That's what this is about. These nations are conspiring together against the people of this earth. They believe that the world is overpopulated. They believe that we all need to be put under behavioral control and live the way that they want us to live, which is to be subservient, which is to be completely removed of all individuality, all individual thought, and to comply to whatever Big Brother tells us. So let's take a look at the document that's talking about an actual attack occurring on July 4th, 2025, the National Blueprint for Biodefense, April 17, 2024. When we issued the first edition of our National Blueprint for Biodefense 8 years ago, we stated that the U.S. was not sufficiently prepared for impending biological threats. Then, as today, we acknowledge that while some biological events were inevitable, their devastating impacts were not. We now know that had our country implemented the 33 recommendations, 33, there's that key number that we know the Freemasons and the secret societies use in all of their scenarios. There's always a 33 in there because they're the ones responsible for creating these events that occur. So 33 recommendations we made in that report. COVID-19 would not have taken such a deadly toll on our citizens and economy. This failure to act resulted in loss of life, societal disruption, and loss of confidence in our government. Despite having made some progress, the nation remains dangerously vulnerable to a biological event. And here is the scenario that they have inside of their blueprint. Listen, the following hypothetical opening remarks by the chair of a congressional joint inquiry provide context for this report by portraying a biological attack sufficient to cause the catastrophic consequences warned of by the Bipartisan Commission on Biodefense. The scenario describes how a biological agent could target humans and animals, how it could emerge, some of the key interagency capabilities required to address the agent and its impacts, and the consequences of failure. Joint inquiry into administration and congressional actions before and during the bioterrorist attacks of July 4th, 2025. U.S. House of Representatives Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Chair, I call this first hearing of the joint inquiry to order 9 weeks ago. Some nation or terrorist group, we still do not know who, attacked the nation's capital.
I'm sorry I'm late. You must be the bride. I'm your groom, Sebastian Klein.
And other U.S. cities with biological weapons as we celebrated Independence Day. The infectious agent that they used to kill at least 280,000 Americans and infected at least 400,000 throughout the country in a single day, in addition to the 200,000 dead and 800,000 sickened animals. These numbers will increase as the disease spreads. Many of our own colleagues and staff here in Congress fell ill and died. Yeah, I'm sure. You mean went underground. Coordinated attacks in allied nations in the days that followed killed tens of thousands more. We are now hearing that the terrorists conducted smaller scale attacks in American cities prior to the July 4th incidents to test our defenses and gauge our responses. These smaller scale attacks went largely unnoticed. Laboratory tests confirm that Nipah virus caused the disease, but we still do not know what methods or adversaries used to infect humans and spread the disease among livestock in rural communities. Animals and people were sick for more than a month before we realized what had happened. While the virus is in the same family as other common human and animal viruses, most American veterinarians and physicians had never seen the Nipah virus before, which delayed recognition. The virus, which in nature does not spread easily among people, was genetically modified to increase its ability to spread from animal to animal, animal to person, and person to person, while still retaining a mortality rate of over 40%. For years before this, many experts said that although nation states and terrorist organizations aspire to use biological weapons, they lack the leadership, organizational wherewithal, infrastructure, expertise, and social support to develop and deploy them. Despite these assessments, Our adversaries conducted the deadly biological attacks of July 4th here and throughout the world. They took advantage of our failure to eliminate vulnerabilities revealed during COVID-19, our failure to conduct sufficient biological intelligence activities to indicate an imminent attack, our failure to achieve early detection of the biological agent, and our failure to identify the source of exposure in a timely way, our failure to rapidly identify and recognize its occurrence in livestock, our failure to rapidly identify that it is in people, our failure to consistently fund public health and healthcare preparedness, our failure to stockpile sufficient medical countermeasures, and our failure to communicate effectively within the government to our allies, and most importantly, to the American people. Ultimately, our adversaries took advantage of our failure to make biodefense a top national priority. It is especially painful to me and the other leaders of committees throughout Congress that we have failed in our duty to gather the necessary information and data, connect the dots, produce intelligence, and prevent and attribute these attacks. Sadly, such as the 9/11 Commission observed in its analysis of the attacks of 2001, the attacks of 2024 can be ascribed to failures to heed many warnings and commit to preventing biological events from affecting our national security. There were failures of prediction, early warning, and detection. The diplomatic, intelligence, law enforcement, and military communities failed to discover the intent and provide advance warning of well-planned and direct attacks on the United States and its interests overseas. Well, of course, because they were the ones responsible for the attack. The Department of Agriculture, Department of Defense, Department of Health and Human Services, and Department of Homeland Security failed to detect the bioagent upon release. There were and continue to be failures to respond effectively. And he says, this goes on to say, as I speak, the critical infrastructure owners and operators and emergency service providers are struggling valiantly to do their jobs while keeping their own families safe in the absence of adequate protection. Our military is splitting resources to help with domestic response and operations overseas, and the intelligence community is spread thin, trying to prevent our enemies from taking further advantage of our vulnerabilities to biological and other threats. That's pretty interesting with the type of military that we have, that another country would be able to unleash a bioweapon in our country. But of course, we know that would be our own military releasing the bioweapon. And then as it says there, it says the military will be splitting their resources for domestic response. They'll let a bioweapon loose, and then our own military will be driving tanks down the streets, I suppose, right? And rounding people up who they say are close to the virus and need to be contained and put inside of a FEMA facility, right? So it goes on to talk about our national leadership at all levels, federal and non-federal, failed to heed the advice of the 9/11 Commission, the Weapons of Mass Destruction Commission. I mean, the stuff that they spew out, right? The 9/11 Commission, give you a break. The Bipartisan Commission on Biodefense and many other experts who warned of the dangers of biological terrorism and warfare. How about the people who are warning about the dangers of the Republican and Democratic Party, who have convinced the people that they're in a democracy or a republic, that they're actually working in the people's best interest when they're sabotaging our way of life, continuing to create bioweapons, or at least tell you that there's bioweapons, so that they could change your way of life, put you in a psychosis, make people wear masks still years later when they're driving in their cars, and of course, convince people out there that they need to get monitoring and tracking underneath their skin, because that's really what it's about, so that they could really detect where it's coming from and who has it, and then we'll all be safe and we'll all be happy, right? While our neighbors are getting detained because of, well, the things that they actually are talking about on the internet, not because they're somebody who may have been exposed to some sort of a virus. And the rest of this isn't really important to read. I mean, there's a long document that you could find for yourself and you could go through. But some of the little bullet points that they put in there is they do discuss misinformation, how one of the important things that they need to handle is, of course, misinformation, because that's always a big thing, right? They can't have people out there saying,